how do we approach the clinical trial? I think it's a great way to conclude this. First of all, we need everyone to participate and refer patients for clinical trial. This is the way we move the needle. This is the way our CHOP was designed. This is the way the progress has always been made. Peter, what would be, in a wrapping conclusion, a few minutes each, briefly, what is your most important take-home message in large cell lymphoma, and a few words on trials?
My take-home message regarding clinical trials is one that's mostly relevant to us, and that we know, we've seen over and over, and we'll see again, that patients who participate in clinical trials frequently have superior outcomes. There are a variety of reasons for that, but clinical trial itself may be part of that. There are some groups who historically have not been able to participate in clinical trials, underserved populations, rural populations. As hard as we can try to bring them into our centers, that's not always practical, and it has not worked. I think that we have to make more of an effort as a research community to bring clinical trials to populations that historically have not had access to them. And I think that all of us actually have looked recently at a funding opportunity from the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, who rightfully perceive this as a weakness, and I think that it's an important
The disparity issue is a very big issue. I mean, there was presentation at ASCO, I think, and there's a presentation so much says the other way around here at ASH, but looking at the African American population in southern U.S., southern states, about 1,000 patients, 300 African American, the outcome was dramatically worse. And it was not from the time to treatment. It was from comorbidities and dose reduction and so on and so forth. Very quickly, wrapping conclusion, Greg, on lymphoma and large cell lymphoma, and advice to our audience.
I think I would just echo what Peter said, that clinical trial is the standard of care. We really have so many new agents and developments in this field that we have to make every effort to enroll patients in clinical trials. And I think the other conclusion is that the field is changing extremely rapidly. We are where we are today, but I think in the next several years we'll see major changes. CAR T cells may be moving more upfront therapy, or at least the second-line therapy. Some of those antibodies, immunoconjugates, will really revolutionize what we do.
Camille?
I mean, I would echo what Peter and Greg say. I would say clinical trials are always the right answer. Our job should be to better include patients, right? Better inclusion and exclusion criteria, so they're easier for patients to get on, and we're not excluding, what patients are. We're defining as these real-world populations. I think we've made significant progress in the relapse setting in the last couple of years with the CAR T. The BR Polo was the first approval in that setting. And hopefully things like the tafasitamab and len will be improve that even further. But I think that post-CAR T is going to be a big population and an unmet need, especially as we move it forward, and we do have to find good options for those patients.
Agree with you, and I think as part of another topic on the clinical trial, the point is that the drug development, we need to accelerate, obviously, and then we need to change the way we do it on the regulatory as well, because it's not moving fast enough. And I think we need to get a conditional approval very early on based on the signal that is showing promising activity in the phase 2, and monitor very carefully at the individual level toxicity and efficacy in the real world data, and then modify the label based, or confirm the label and modify based on what we see in the real world. Otherwise, it's not going to move fast enough. Nathan, last word conclusion of on lymphoma.
Yeah, the good news is large cell lymphoma outcomes are getting better. The bad news is that we are incredibly inefficient in the way we conduct clinical research across the world. Right now there's a major gap in the understanding of the biological understanding of these diseases and what we do in clinical practice. And I think that was highlighted in the beginning of this talk when we talk about we have all these subsets, we understand some of the genomic profiles, but we have no way to stratify patients into different therapy based upon this knowledge. So again, what they're doing at the lab has yet to translate really into what we do in the clinic. And I think some of that has to do with the lack of mechanistic and correlative studies that occur in our clinical trials. So again, we continue to enroll.
To validate what is observation.
Yeah, so we continue to put thousands of patients on trials, and if you look at the percentage of trials that actually have correlates built in to help understand how these drugs work and who they work in, it's extremely small. So I think
often it's an issue because it has to be made optional, or it is an issue because it slows down the enrollment and so on.
So we have to push for these kind of studies in clinical
liquid
trials.
biopsies might help this.
Right, and I think it is getting easier, as you mentioned, ctDNA, and there are a lot of ways that we could potentially look at the peripheral blood instead of requiring repeat biopsies. But again, I think right now we're really seeing a gap between what we understand in the lab and how we're practicing in the clinic, and that really, the only way we're going to change that is to integrate some of these studies into clinical trials.
Dr. Chavez?
Well, I mean, I think there are several options for the DLBCL. There's options in the pipeline, but I think what I would kind of recommend will be kind of the early referral, especially for the patients that we know are going to be the bad actors, like the double-hit lymphomas. I always recommend referral to an academic center to kind of make sure that we determine the right treatment, the early relapse, and in general, though, the relapse patient, that because there could be options for them for the future.
I think the future is great. I think we're very fortunate to be oncologists at this time. I think this is a challenge because we have so much innovation going. We didn't even talk about data analytics. We just talked about clinical trial and drug development. I think this is important that we partner all together. We unfragment or defragment healthcare as much as we can because it's a real problem. We see patients, you give them a treatment, and then we don't see them the next time around, and it makes it very difficult. So there's a huge effort of sharing data and sharing information that is a real challenge. Regulatory effort that needs to be done for the drug development to change the way and to allow people to get access to tissue and samples and liquid biopsies repeatedly, because this is a real challenge. It doesn't, if you don't do this systematically, it never happens.
That's right.
Unless you have a champion locally, it never happens. Mayo might be different, but this is it's a real challenge. Yeah. And I think that the vast majority of patients are treated in the community, so we hope that this program was very helpful to you, and then shed some lights of the bright future of large cell lymphoma. And we thank you on behalf of our panel. We hope you found again this very interesting and informative, and then we wish you good luck in managing your patient. Thank you.